11. If Zael had told Kentril that Diablo himself had resided in the palace where Atana lived, the veteran soldier could not have been more horrified. Gregus Mati, the man who had cursed the kingdom and lusted after Khan's daughter, not only lived near, but lurked near enough to do her harm. Never in his life had Kentril ever wanted to slay a person so bad. Not even in his so many campaigns. During those, he had been performing a duty for which he had been paid. Nothing more. Here, the task took a personal nature beyond any he had ever confronted. Where in the palace? He demanded of Zael as the duo worked their way to the hill. Where? Below it, actually. As for a precise location, that cannot be ascertained, for there are forces in play, the likes of which I have never come across. Spells that I cast that should work to delve deeper are twisted and turned, rendering them useless. If I get closer, perhaps that will change. They've got to be warned, Kentril insisted. They have to know the dangers right below them. At the base of the ancient steps, the necromancer forced his companion to halt. Captain Dumont, have you noticed anything amiss in the palace so far? Only that some of my men have not returned. But neither Lord Khan or his daughter seems at all at risk. The soldier did not like the way Zael spoke. What of that? You fought in many battles, many wars. Do you announce to your enemy your intentions, or do you insist to try to trick them, to leave them unsuspecting? Kentril's eyes narrowed. Are you trying to tell me we should say nothing to them? Not until we at least discover more, or until we sense some danger to them. And what would you suggest we do, necromancer? Zael glanced around, making certain no one stood near enough to hear. We find out what lies beneath first. Part of Kentril thought Zael's suggestion foolish, that the right thing would do to be to alert Itana of Gregus Mati's return. Another part, though, feared that the corrupted sorcerer would also find out. Surely Mati watched Khan and his daughter closely to make certain that they did not know of his hidden presence. Alerted, he would most likely strike, and strike to destroy. But the odds were good that the villains were also watched old master's guests. If they simply win and hunt of him, he would surely lay traps designed to kill all. We won't tell them just yet, Kentril finally agreed. But we need some sort of distraction that would capture his interest, so much that he won't pay any mind to our searches. He's got a point there, came Humbart's muffled voice. Zael tapped the pouch, then nodded in agreement. They kept silent about their goals as they re-entered the palace some time later. Neither had yet thought up a manner by which the attention of the hidden spellcaster might be diverted, but both knew that they could not wait long. Surely Gregus Mati had some imminent mischief in mind. Thinking of that, Kentril sought out Albert. He found the younger mercenary just preparing to set out with two others for the city, which fit directly with the captain's plan. Pulling Albert aside, Kentril whispered, Don't ask why, but I've orders for you. Although his body revealed no reaction to his commander's surprising words, the blonde fighter's eyes let Kentril know that Albert understood the seriousness. Aye, Captain? I need to cut short the men's celebrations for a time being. I want you three to go down and collect the others you find. I want everyone up here and accounted for. Anyone who can't be found, let me know. Above all else, don't split up. Don't let any of the locals know what you're up to. And if anyone offers to help you find someone missing, refuse that help. This at last brought some reaction. Just how serious is this, Captain? Kentril recalled his own encounter, when the city had been transformed into a nightmare straight out of hell. He had finally come to the conclusion that the two women had used some exotic potion that had not only weakened him, but also caused his horrific hallucinations. It had been said that some assassins use such potions on their nails, and that only a touch might be needed to affect a victim. Serious enough. Be especially aware of two women, one in gold, and both far too eager for your company. As he sent Albor and the others off, Zyle rejoined him. What did you tell them? Enough to be wary. It won't look out of question that I would be checking up on my men, Necromancer. Mercenaries have a tendency to wear out their welcome quickly in times of peace, and having them all called in will just seem like a humble, honest precaution. Do we tell Master Sin as well? Kentrell shrugged. I don't know. I do want to tell Gorse right away, though, and he's near the sorcerer. They quickly hurried to the library, but found, to their mutual surprise, that it was empty. The table where the Vigerai had sat for so long still lay all but hidden under a cluttered pile of books, scrolls, but Sin, in the mountain of notes he had made, had vanished. The captain noticed one thing missing: Gorst. The giant might have simply followed Sin in order to keep track of him, but the considerable pile of parchment missing, coupled with the difficulty the short spellcaster would have had trying to carry all of it around, made it obvious that Sin had commandeered Gorst into helping him with something. Barely had Kentrell and Zyle turned back when from down the corridor, Atana appeared. She saw the two, and her expression, already bright, seemed to the fighter to positively glow. Kentrell! You've done it! You've done it! Utterly ignoring the necromancer, she threw her arms around the captain and kissed him passionately. Kentrell momentarily forgot the sinister danger below as he accepted Atana's gratitude, but he knew not what she thanked him for he did not care. Gradually, he became aware of a bemused Zaya watching him from behind Lord Khan's daughter. At first annoyed by this intrusion, Kentrell finally recalled what he and his companion had been trying to accomplish. With gentle force, Kentrell pushed away Atana, reconciling himself with at least being able to gaze up her at close. And what am I being thanked so well for? As if you didn't know. She almost kissed him again, but noticed his reluctance. A playful smile spreading across her perfect features, she allowed Zyle to join in the conversation. You might find this of interest too, sir. I suspect that I might, my lady. Atana graciously accepted his courtesy. At this moment, she informed them, the Vigerai sorcerer, quoth Sin, has an audience. My father. Already? Interrupted Kentrell. He had not thought Sin to be trying to persuade Lord Khan for some time yet. Surely the Vigerai's greed had much to do with this sudden development. Kentrell only hoped that by rushing in, old Sin had not ruined everything. The good sorcerer has told Father that he thinks in a day or two he can help remove Gregus' curse. It will take hours of preparation, and at least much spell work, but he feels certain it will succeed. Her eyes widened in hope and anticipation. Kentrell prayed that Sin would not let Juris Khan down, if only for Atana's sake. I'm pleased to hear that, but... And, more important, for some, the red-haired princess added, her gaze especially fixed on Captain Dumont now. Master Sin has already accomplished one miracle. He has convinced Father that Yura should be part of the mortal world again, that the quest for heaven is one that we should undertake in a matter of any mortal, through the trials of life itself. Kentrell hesitated to respond, hoping he had correctly understood her. Juris Khan won't try to recast the spell? He won't try to claim the sanctuary of heaven? No! Thanks to the Vigerai, Father now believes that we have a role here. He thinks that we may be needed to help guide the rest of the world towards the proper path. Father even wonders if this was meant to be from the beginning. It all sounded too fantastic to Captain Dumont, but in Atana's face he only read truth. Lord Khan had changed his mind. Sin had actually succeeded, and far sooner than Kentrell could have ever imagined possible. My congratulations on this news, my lady, Zael politely said. Thank you, she replied, giving the necromancer a momentary smile before returning her full attention to Kentrell. Father is so thrilled. He would like to honor you and Master Sin shortly with a private dinner. You too, if you wish, Master Zael. The pale figure shook his head. My kind are not known for their social behavior. And besides, I have really done nothing to deserve such recognition. However, I certainly agree that Captain Dudumont and the sorcerer should be so honored. As you wish. Atana seemed to forget the necromancer from there on. Kentrell, I hope you will say yes. What else could he say? Of course. The honor's mine. Splendid. It's all settled then. A servant will be at your quarters before long to help you dress. Dress? The mercenary did not like the sound of that. Of course, interjected Zael innocently. One must always be properly attired for a state dinner, Captain. Before Kentrell could protest, Atana kissed him once before. Then she hurried away. Both men watched her alluring form swiftly vanish down the hall. A unique woman, Captain Dumont. Very much. The necromancer swept closer. This dinner could be to our benefit. With Lord Khan and his daughter occupied with you and the Viziri, I can try surreptitiously to investigate our likely route to below. There must be some detailed outline of the palace's design, and possibly even mention of the caverns Khan hinted of even deeper. Kentrell continued to eye the direction down which Atana had disappeared. I still don't not like in the least telling her. Remember that Bregismatzi once desired Khan's daughter. He has not touched her so far, but if he realizes that she's been alerted, he may decide to steal her away. Her ignorance is her safety. All right, the captain snapped. He glared at the tall, slim figure beside him. Just make certain that you don't get caught. That'd be hard to explain. If I am, I shall make it known to all that I acted on my own. She will have no reason to lose her trust in you, Captain. With a slight bow, Zael departed. Kentrell frowned, still not quite certain about this pact he had made with the necromancer, then headed to his quarters to see what could be done about making himself presentable for this no doubt elegant dinner. He would have rather been fighting a pitched battle. A crisp black dress uniform with gold ornamentation had been laid out on his bed. A uniform with long, sleek pants and a jacket with sharp tails. Epaulets decorated the jacket's shoulders, and stylized image of a crown and a sword had been sewn on the left breast. The gleaming black leather boots rose knee-high, completing a rather dashing image. Kentrell felt foolish in the outfit. He was a soldier, a mercenary. The uniform should have been worn by a commander or a general, not someone of his lowly station. Still, he could not appear to the formal dinner with Lord Khan and Atana dressed in his tired, oft-mended garments. That the uniform fit perfectly did not entirely surprise the captain. Atana would not have bothered to have set it aside for him if she had known not that it would perfectly. He wondered whether if it had belonged to someone else, or if somehow she had simply conjured it up. Although he knew the way to his destination, Kentrell found 2 armed guards outside his door waiting to escort him. With much ceremony, they marched down the halls with him, leading the fighter at last to where Khan waited. Welcome, my friend, the fatherly figure called from his chair. I am so pleased that you've agreed to join us. Because of the robed monarch's inability to move, a heavily sculpted table had been brought in for the dinner. Decorated with filigree and lovingly carved by some expert hand, it had cost as much Kentrell has made in 10 years, if he was lucky. Atop it, a golden cloth had been set, and on top of that, gleaming plates, pristine silverware, and tall, magnificent candelabras. 3 chairs had been placed at the table. Juris Condon himself could not be moved off the dais, but a rather yet no less richly adorned table had been positioned near him. The larger table had been turned so that the Lord of Ure sat at its head. Quoth Sin already sat on what would have been the left of their host, but Kentrell saw no sign of Atana. However, as he approached, she suddenly emerged from the side of the room, hand held out toward him. He stared unashamedly at her, both because he could not see how he had not missed her entrance, and because nothing else in the richly decorated chamber could match the vision she presented. Her billowing emerald gown complemented her lush crimson tresses, which had been artfully draped down over her shoulders and breasts. The sleeves stretched all the way over the backs of her hands and even fit over 3 lower fingers of each, almost like a partial glove. Other than that, her shoulders were bare, and her gown plunged just enough to entice, but not enough to flaunt her perfect form shamelessly. He took the hand she offered and kissed it back. Atana then took his hand in hers and led to the table. You shall sit there, at the end, she murmured. I'll be at your left, very near. Kentrell went to his appointed place, then recalled how polished officers acted in the presence of ladies of the court. He steered her toward her own chair, then held it out for her. Smiling prettily, Atanas accepted this gracious gesture. About time, Sin muttered as Kentrell seated himself. Judging by the empty goblet in front of him, the Vajari had at least already had 1 cup of wine. He had come clad, of course, in the robes that he always wore. As a sorcerer, Sin had not been expected to dress in anything other than the garments of his calling, and in truth, the rune-inscribed robes did not seem out of place here. You look splendid, Juris Khan informed the captain. Does he not look splendid, my dear? Yes, father. A wise and portentous choice, daughter. Truly, Captain Dumont, the uniform is appropriate for you. I thank you, my lord. Kentrell did not know what else to say. I'm so gratified that both of you could come at such short notice. I owe each of you much already, and it appears I'll owe you much more before very long. We are honored, Lord Khan, quoth Sin responded, raising his empty glass in salute. A livered servant appeared from nowhere and filled it from a dark green bottle, which perhaps had been what the Vajra had desired all along. Kentrell nodded in appreciation of his host's words, although he did not feel as if he had done so much to deserve the praises. Yes, he had helped set the key to light in place, but any strong arm could have done that. More to the point, it would be Sin who would release Ure's ruler from Gregus Mati's curse. Captain Dumont could understand that the sorcerer being given his due, but for himself, he felt grateful just to be able to sit near Atana. Snapping his fingers, Juris Khan had the first portion of their dinner brought out by the several uniformed servants, so similar in appearance that Kentrell had to study each golden figure in turn in order to ascertain that they were not all identical. The servants treated him with as much honor as they did their master, which only further embarrassed him. He was a hired soldier, a man of rank, only because he had survived when so many other brave but poor men had not. As the dinner went on, the veteran fighter feasted on the fruits and vegetables the likes of which he had never seen, and thick, well-cooked meats dripping with their own juices. The wine he drank had such full flavor that Kentrell had to take care for fear he would imbibe too much. Everything he had tasted had been made to perfection. The dinner seemed more of a dream than a reality. Throughout it all, he feasted on the glorious sight of Atana. So much so as not until late in the meal that a question had bothered him earlier had came to mind. He stared at what little remained of the contents of his plate, finally asking with the utmost caution, "My lord, where does the food come from?" Sin glanced at him as if just heard an unruly child interrupt. Juris Khan, however, not only took his question in stride, but made it sound so very wise. "Yes, so you should ask. You wonder, no doubt, because I've indicated that although we are trapped between heaven and the mortal plane, we were aware of our fate. In some ways, time did indeed pass, but in others, it did not. Even I can't fully explain it, I'm sorry to say. We only knew that years went by in the true world, but we did not age. We did not much sleep. And, most important, we did not hunger at all." "Not at all?" Kentrell uttered with some surprise. "Well, perhaps we did, but only for our salvation. And as we did not age, so too did our food not age. Thus we are still plentifully stocked and shall be for some time." Atana's father smiled benevolently at both guests. "And by then, I hope our situation will be already much more improved." Kentrell nodded, grateful for the answer, but inwardly still embarrassed for having asked it in the first place. "My lord," piped up the Vizieri, "during the time you were explaining the obvious to the captain here, some further considerations formulated in my head." Khan found much interest in this. "Considerations dealing with my condition?" I will definitely have need of your daughter's ability as well as your own, just as I earlier proposed, you see." As Sin began a lengthy and for a mundane captain's incomprehensible explanation, Kentrell gladly returned his attention to his hostess. Atana noticed him gazing at her again and smiled over the goblet she had just started raising to her lips. Eyes and mind on the heavenly view before him, Captain Dumont grew careless with a knife and fork he had been using. The blade slipped from the bit of meat he had been carving and jabbed the side of the hand that had been holding the other utensil. Drops of blood splattered on the dish. Pain shot through Kentrell. The lavish, brightly lit chamber became a chamber of horrors instead. Blood, fresh blood, seemed to flow over tarnished, scratched walls, and the ceiling, which now existed only as a jagged hole, revealed a sky as turbulent and as tortured as the rest of his surroundings. Crimson and black clouds did battle. Monstrous bolts of lightning making where they could collided. Swirling maelstroms formed, seeming ready to swallow the bleeding world below. Bones that looked suspiciously human lay scattered everywhere upon the stained and cracked floor, and something, not a rat, scurried over one before dissing into a small fissure running alongside of the wall. A fierce wind coursed through, howling as it went. An intense heat that somehow still chilled Kentrell to his very soul swept along in its wake. Moans and cries suddenly assailed his ears. He rose at last from the rotting table, seeing on the broken, dust-ridden plate before him not the freshly cooked meal he had been eating, but instead a moldy, maggot-infested piece of greenish meat. The moans and cries continued to increase in intensity, so much so that the captain had to cover his ears. He stumbled back, falling against one wall, and only then finding the source of the mournful pleas. From each of the walls, hundreds of mouths began to cry out for help. Those nearest to him seemed to scream the loudest. Pulling away in horror, Kentrell stumbled back to the table. And, into all of things, a very annoyed quoth Sin.
What do you think you are doing, Cretan? You're making a fool of yourself in front of our host.
The Vizier pointed in the direction of the dais. When Kentrell looked there, he did not see the good and fatherly Juris Khan. The chair remained fixed in place, true, and of all things it looks most untouched by the horrors around it. But in it did not sit the Lord of Ure. Before Captain Dumont's fearful eyes arose.
Kentrell, speak to me! Satana, Kentrell!
And as if it had all been a dream, the grand chamber immediately became whole and bright and alive once more. Atana held his bleeding hand tight, and her eyes wide with concern. Staring into those eyes gave the mercenary something on which to focus, to use as an anchor for his sudden questionable sanity.
Captain Dumont, are you unwell?
With great reluctance, Kentrell looked to Juris Khan. He breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing the robed, masterful monarch standing tall. Absolute concern written all over his elderly visage. Gone was the image of what? Kentrell could not even recall exactly what he'd seen. Only that it had been nothing like he had ever come across in all his life. The sheer act of trying to remember the slightest image caused him to shiver. Khan's daughter brought a goblet to his mouth. "Drink this, my darling." For her, and her alone, he drank it. The wine calmed him, pushed away all the vestiges of his nightmare. Atana led him back to his chair and sat. I'm sorry, everyone.
There is no need for one who is ill to apologize,
Khan kindly remarked. One hand is still on the captain's shoulder. I think I know what happened, Father. We walked in the garden earlier and something bit him.
I see, yes. The jungle insects sometimes make their way here, and some are said to carry disease that causes delusions and more. One must have bitten you, Captain Dumont.
Having fought in many vile lands where weather and wildlife made more of a fearsome foe than the opposing soldiers, Kentrell could well believe their conclusions, yet the monstrous clarity of his hallucinations stuck with the fighter. What within him could dredge up such horrors? As a man who had seen and shed blood, he dreamt about the dark side of war, but never had his imagination created such a picture. Still, Atana's explanation would give reason for his earlier episode in the city. Had that been the first sign of the sickness? He had assumed that Zarea or the other women had drugged him, but such a drug should have worn off by now. Lord Khan seated himself again.
Well, whatever the cause, I'm sure under my daughter's ministrations you will recover fine. I want you to be able to accept my gifts with full clarity of mind, so that I may not force upon you anything you do not wish. Gifts? Aye, good captain. Although if you accept, you will be captain no more. The robed figure leaned toward his two guests. In the struggle against Gregismatsi, lives were lost. Important ones. Good friends. A vacuum thus exists in Ure, and if we were to become part of the mortal world again, that vacuum must be filled. You too can help in that. Kentrell felt Atana's fingers tighten on his shoulder, and when he looked up, she gave him an expression of pride and pleasure. Master Sen and I have already discussed this in part, so you have some advantage over Captain Dumont. Nonetheless, the decision is no less significant for a win. And so I state my offer again, with more consciousness this time. All those who wielded and governed the magic arts in my kingdom have perished, save my daughter and myself. I ask of you if you will bring honor again to that which Gregis tainted. Ask you to take the mantle of royal sorcerer, the magical knowledge of my realm, yours, if you will sit at my left hand. The Vajra rose slowly, a satisfied smile across the wrinkled countenance. Kentrop could just only imagine the spellcaster's pleasure. He had more than gained long-term access to the books and the scrolls of the library. For all practical purpose, Juris Khan had given the diminutive figure everything the Vajra could have ever want. My Lord Khan, quoth Sin graciously replied, nothing would please me more. I am gratified. Now the stately monarch turned toward Kentrell, who felt his stomach tie a knot. Captain Kentrell Dumont! Through your efforts to help us and the recommendations of one who has come to know you better than I've learned of a man of ability, determination, honor, and loyalty. I can think of no better qualities in a soldier. Nay, a leader. Khan steeped his fingers. We're an old realm in a new world. One you know much better. There's need for such a man as you to guide us, to protect us from elements that may desire our downfall in this different time. I need you as a commander of my warriors, a protector of my people, a general, as that uniform calls for. Despite his recent spell, Kentrell pushed himself back to his feet. My gracious Lord Khan. But his host politely cut him off. And in Ure, you should know that such a rank comes hand in hand with title. The commander of our defenders is not only a soldier, but a prince of the land as well. He left the captain momentarily speechless. Atana, her hand now on his arm, squeezed tightly. And as the member of the nobility, all rights are therein, are yours. You'll be granted an estate, be able to raise servants of your own, marry other members of nobility. At the last, Atana's hand squeezed particularly tightly. When Kentrell briefly let his gaze fly to her, he saw an answer for why Juris Khan would especially offer this wondrous posting. Despite their liaison so far, the soldier had always known inside he had truly no hope for a lasting love. Atana was a princess, born and raised to marry someone equal to or of her loftily station. Kings, sultans, emperors, princes could have easily asked for her hand. Not a lowly officer.
Now her father had eradicated that one impediment with one single gesture.
And so forth,
Finished Juris Khan. He smiled as a father would smile at his son. Perhaps a foreshadowing of events.
What say you, good captain?
What could Kentrell say? Only a fool or a madman would refuse. And despite his recent episodes, he did not feel himself either of those.
I am honored to accept, my lord. Then it's all settled. All I've offered is most definitely yours. You and Master Sin have made me very happy.
Master Sin assures me of complete success in freeing me, and that holds true 3 days hence. As marked by the sun seen beyond our borders, I shall, before the entire court, officially acknowledge your new stations. Khan nearly fell back into his chair as if both physically and emotionally exhausted by his grand gesture. You've the gratitude of all Ure, but the gratitude of my humble self the most. Atana returned to his seat, and she blushed even more whenever her eyes and Kentrell's met. The talk began to turn again to Quoth Sin's plan to free Lord Khan from his chair, eventually even drawing Atana in because of her necessary role. Left alone now, Captain Dumont turned to his own thoughts, and those thoughts concerned his subterfuge. Even after all Juris Khan had granted him, after all Atana had promised him with her eyes and her lips, he had said nothing concerning the possibility that Gregis Matsi still lived and might yet turn his black arts against on them. At this moment, Kentrell knew Zail crept about the palace, seeking behind the backs of their hosts the plans of its design. True, the pair had only the best of intentions in mind, but still the captain felt as if each second he failed to speak, he betrayed Atana and her father further. Despite his regrets, though, Kentrell chose to say nothing. If Zail proved to be wrong, no harm would be done. Yet, if the necromancer had divined correctly, then there would be only him and Kentrell to deal with the threat. Kentrell could do nothing while so impaired, and at the moment, would Captain Dumont ever consider letting Atana face the corrupt spellcaster? Sin already had too much with which to deal with. No, if Gregis Matsi did indeed live, Kentrell would have to see it for himself, that the corrupted sorcerer paid the ultimate price for his past crimes. Atana caught his gaze once more. She smiled and blushed, completely ignorant of the darkening thoughts behind the captain's own smile. No matter what happened, Gregis Matsi could not be allowed ever again to touch her. Not even if it cost Kentrell Dumont his own life in the process.